Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel called zuzanareact, where I learn all things Bharat with your help, and I just share my Slovak Central European point of view. And today we are going to look into a video of Dwaraka Underwater Mystery. I'm actually super curious, but before we get into the video,
please like this video and click on the subscribe button and turn on the notification. Thank you so much for your support.
Right. So I did not preview the video because I wanted you to see my first time reaction, and I'm dying to actually watch this. So let us begin.
Real nahi hai. Mahabharata and all sab bagwas hai. It's just mythology. There's a huge difference between mythology and history. How many times have we heard this? But do you know, few decades
Wow, I have to stop it right there. I remember us having a chat in the comments about difference between mythology and history. So this is really real. Interesting. Let's continue.
back, Indian archaeologists found a submerged city in the exact same place where Dwaraka is said to have been existed according to Mahabharata. Yes, Dwaraka, the same exact city which was built by Lord Krishna himself. But at the same time, a lot of false information about Dwaraka have been spreading across the internet, which portrays the magnificent Krishna statue on a huge palace as the archaeological remains of Dwaraka, which is not true at all. So what are the archaeological findings and what is that trying to establish? Let's analyze. According to Mahabharata, Dwaraka was a fortified city which was spread across 84 kilometers. And it was situated at a point where Gomati River and Arabian Sea meet. After the death of Lord Krishna, this ancient city was submerged by sea, and this was witnessed by Arjuna. To this day, Dwaraka is still one among the prominent pilgrimage sites in India. But what we need to establish here is Dwaraka is not just religiously important but also archaeologically significant. The excavation of Dwaraka is the most important archaeological excavation happened in the 20th century. Those who don't know, there's a 1,000-year gap in the history of ancient India. We don't know what exactly happened after the decline of Harappan civilization and before the emergence of Buddha. And this excavation of Dwaraka filled that empty space. The first archaeological excavation of Dwaraka was conducted by the Deccan College of Pune in 1963. They excavated around the outside walls of the Dwarkadish temple, and they published a report in 1963 where it was clearly established that the present Dwaraka is minimum 2,000 years old. In fact, they went on to an extent saying, from our observation of the various places in and around Dwaraka, as also from the evidence of excavation, one can definitely say that this is the Dwaraka mentioned in the Mausala Parva of the Mahabharata, the Dwaraka Mahatmya of the Skanda Purana, and other Puranas, and the Gatachataka. This particular excavation done by the Deccan College of Pune was the first serious effort made to determine the antiquity of Dwaraka and to find out whether it could be considered as Krishna's Dwaraka or not. Without any doubt, they established that the modern Dwaraka is at least 2,000 years old. But it created a much bigger problem. According to their conclusion, Dwaraka was built after the Mauryan period. But as per the literary and inscriptional references, Mahabharata happened at least in the 6th century, if not earlier. That means minimum 8,000 years back. However, they agreed that this conclusion is based on the findings of that particular excavation, and there is still a huge possibility of finding evidences which could be much older. So the archaeologists wanted to do a new excavation on land close to the Dwarkadish temple. But to do that, the modern buildings nearby the temple need to be removed, which is not at all an easy task. 1979, after 16 years from the first excavation, archaeologist S.R. Rao got an opportunity to excavate Dwaraka. He managed to pull down a Panchayat office nearby the Dwarkadish temple. After the demolition, they were clearing out the place. At that time, few sculptures of 19th century were recovered and a stone platform was found. What do we usually expect when we demolish a building? There'll just be land, right? If we excavate it, we may find some ancient artifacts. But here, after pulling down that building, they found a stone platform covering something underneath. At first, the archaeologists hesitated to remove that. But after much hesitation, they removed it, and what they found under that stone was so shocking.
Hey, you want to get leaner? You want to get stronger? Get more
They found remains of a well-preserved temple of Vishnu which belonged to the 9th century. That temple had a garbhagriha, a corridor, an assembly hall and a small porch. And when excavated further, right under this temple, they found another temple which is much older. And under the foundation of the second temple, they found remains of another temple which is much older than the earlier two. So they demolished the Panchayat office and found the remains of 3 temples layered one by one. And they also found a huge rectangular stone structure which at first they thought could be a well, but later they found out it's not a well but in fact a secret passage which was mentioned in the Puranas. This secret passage was connected through the Kusheshwar Mahadev temple with the Dwarkadish temple. And while pulling down a modern wall, they found beautifully carved pillars of another huge temple which belonged to the 12th century. The 3 temples found earlier were destroyed by the sea, but this one, the 4th temple, was destroyed due to vandalism by the enemies. Finally, from this particular excavation, they found out there were totally 8 Dwarakas, including the current one. The time period of first Dwaraka could be between 16th to 15th century, which means anywhere around 3,500 years old. And the evidence for this was the lustrous redware found in the excavation. The second Dwaraka could belong to anywhere between 900 to 500 BCE, which means minimum 2,500 years old. And the evidence for this were the house floors and thin black on red wares. The third Dwaraka might have existed anywhere between 2nd century BCE and 6th century AD, which means anywhere around 1,500 to 2,200 years old. And the evidence for this was the temple found in the last layer. Fourth Dwaraka might belong to 7th to 8th century AD, which means around 1,300 years old. And the evidence for this was the temple which is found in the second layer. Fifth Dwaraka might have existed between 8th to 12th century, which means around 1,000 years old. And the evidence for this was the temple which is found in the first layer after the destruction of that Panchayat office. Sixth Dwaraka might have existed in 12th century, which means 800 years old. And the evidence for this was the 4th temple which was vandalized by the enemies. The 7th Dwaraka may belong anywhere between 13th to 15th century, which means around 700 years old. And the evidence for this was the inner and outer portions of the Dwarkadish temple. Finally, 8th Dwaraka is the modern township we have right now, and it might have started after the 16th century. This onshore excavation, which was done on land, proved without any doubt that Dwaraka is minimum 3,500 years old and it was destroyed by the ocean. Mahabharata and Puranas say Dwaraka was built by Krishna and then it was followed by the sea. If there's any truth in this, there should be at least few buildings buried in the seabed. To find out that, it's important to carry out a marine excavation, which means researching in the ocean. But the time we are talking about is 1980s. 40 years back from now. And marine archaeology is not an easy task. You need archaeologists, historians, oceanographers, geologists, divers, underwater photographers, and a lot of the technicians. Even today, the Archaeological Survey of India is not funded enough. Imagine 40 years back, and this is going to be the first marine excavation for India. There were no archaeologists who could dive in the sea, and the few available local divers were completely ignorant of archaeological procedures. And there was no agency to fund the marine archaeological studies at that time. Finally, after a lot of struggles, they managed to arrange 80,000 rupees. Thus, the first marine excavation of Dwaraka started in 1983. From then, 12 marine excavations were done in and around Dwaraka till 1992. In all these underwater excavations, they found a lot of artifacts like seal, wall structures, iron objects, brass objects, potteries, stone objects like blades, stool, anchors, particularly triangular shaped 3-hole anchors were found. After all the research, they found out that Dwaraka is not just a single town, but a city-state which includes many towns. And there was also a huge port where trading used to happen. Now, is there any way we can claim that this Dwaraka found underwater is the same Dwaraka built by Krishna himself? To find out that, S.R. Rao, the chief archaeologist who carried out the Dwaraka excavation, compares the evidence collected from the excavation with with the writings of Mahabharata and other Puranas. The location and physical features of the island bed Dwaraka matches very closely with the place called Kusasthali in Mahabharata. The 30 to 40 meter wooded hill in bed Dwaraka matches with the Raivataka hill referred in Mahabharata. After the submergence, Dwaraka is described as the citadel in water. As per this description, we found fort walls along the seashore and submerged walls in the sea. And 6 fortified structures were found in the ocean. And these structures matches well with the description of Dwaraka city in the Skanda Purana. And as mentioned in Mahabharata, Dwaraka was highly civilized with engineering skills, advanced technology, and high literacy of the people. Hereby, archaeologist S.R. Rao confirms that Dwaraka is not an exaggeration or myth, but was a city in real sense. But the question is, it's been 30 years since it's found. How many of us were taught about this in our schools? Our archaeologists proved that Dwaraka, the city built by Lord Krishna himself, existed exactly the way it's described in Mahabharata, the great epic of India, which is always being ridiculed as mythology. Why the hell none of us are talking about it? Is it really just left out casually, or is it being hidden intentionally? Obviously, the media doesn't care. The government is not spending enough on archaeology. The least we could do is spreading the information which were proven evidentially. I think it's high time for us to reclaim our law.
So this is pretty epic. I mean, you know, when I was young, I really wanted to become an archaeologist. I thought it would be so much fun. I feel like now I just can go to India and it's so much stuff there. I think for me it was, you know, Egypt and kind of Latin America, like the Mayas and Incas and all of that that propelled my interest. I always had interest in like lost civilizations and what happened and things that we can never really explain. I guess that also explains my interest in spirituality. So wow, this is amazing, you guys. Like, I just love when, you know, things like that come out and you can see how civilization that came before us, I dare to say, were a bit more advanced or much more advanced than we are. And it's interesting. And to her point about why, I would love to know what you think, like why government or people are not really talking about it. I think obviously when it comes to news, they're interested in, you know, things to be very transactional, but this is a very interesting piece of your history nonetheless. And it's I think with history is like you get certain books, you know, it takes a lot of money to reprint a book every year to include something new. I don't know why people don't just use internet for that, but never mind. So you it would be like a big money extra, I think, for the government. And it's interesting because once you pass that study period, you actually have nowhere really, unless you are properly interested, to find out that information. That's kind of how I see, like how you don't you know, get to know more of your history or you know, around the world, that you'd have to read. So in Slovakia we have something called historical review, which, you know, if I would continue to be interested in history, that is what I would want to read. But because I'm interested in so many topics, I'm not, you know, even looking there. So I think that this is pretty epic, and I wonder what else I can uncover with you about your history and can learn about. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give thumbs up, share, like, and subscribe to this channel. And until the next video, I'm sending you so much love. You take care. Bye-bye.